But yeah, welcome everyone to Winning Prime Day 2026. Really excited about uh, this webinar. Today we're going to talk about how we think about Prime Day 2026, more specifically, 5 priorities that sellers should be focusing on this year. And Prime Day is right around the corner. We don't have exact dates. Couldn't get it out of Jason, but with a quick Google search, we think it might be late June, but timing is now to prepare. So before we get into the 5 areas that we'll dive into, let's do a quick round of introductions. I can kick it off. Matt Tomaszewski, I head up our North American partnerships here at Channel Engine. Jason, how about you?
Hi, I'm Jason Rubenstein. Great to be here, everyone. I'm a senior partner development manager at Amazon with about 20 years experience in e-commerce and advertising. I work with agencies and sellers every day launching new brands on Amazon. So I get a front row seat to what works, what doesn't, as we head into these big tentpole periods.
Awesome, welcome. And last but not least, Tom, how about yourself?
I'm Tom Worley. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Jungle Scout. My career has largely been centered on retail and consumer data across a variety of businesses. At Jungle Scout, I'm heavily involved in our go-to-market strategy around enterprise customers. And so look forward to showing you some of our data as it pertains to the conversation here.
Yeah, and I've previewed that data. It's very exciting to just try to understand how you can best prepare for leading up to Prime Day and even beyond. Just a quick introduction on Channel Engine. We are a marketplace integrator. So we connect to 1,300 global marketplaces, helping customers think about becoming successful on Amazon and beyond. Founded in 2013 in the Netherlands, and we have a US headquarter in New York City. Team of a couple hundred people, offices globally, 24/7 support, and customer success globally as well. And this is a little heat map of some of the marketplaces that we help our clients to become successful on. So you see Amazon is definitely there and in every single region. So we're super excited to dive in to finding success in Prime Day 2026. Kick it over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so if you want to know about Amazon, it's not bragging if it's true. We have the best data you can find. And we'll show you a little bit of that, but that, for those who are more technically minded, that's because we have a pretty direct line of sight in about 18% of Amazon GMV, particularly in the 60% of data that's 3P. And so as it pertains to benchmarking and disruption in your category, that's where things get pretty interesting. And we'll show you a lot of that today.
Awesome. And then Jason, I don't know if you need to introduce Amazon, but
I appreciate the opportunity. I think, we can move forward.
So look, we're going to cover off on what we have picked today as some of the main priorities to win Prime Day 2026. So what we're looking at is visibility, inventory, pricing, advertising, and operations. We want to put into some clear insights on what's changed between last year and this year, some practical tips that you can apply right now to become successful in 2026. And then please do drop any questions in the chat box. We're going to try to answer them as we go along, and we want this to be as interactive as possible. With that said, maybe Jason, can you give us a overview of 2025 Prime Day?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I feel like a little bit of a broken record, no pun intended, honestly, because we say this every year. It's a record-breaking event. It continues to grow and continues to scale. I mean, of course, like the obvious thing, we moved to 4 days this year, so longer event, more demand across those days, and reducing that just 1 day peak. So according to third parties, over 24 billion spent during Prime Day. Billions were saved from the consumer standpoint, but a lot of AI-driven search and shopping surged last year's Prime Day, and I'm sure we'll dive into that too. But a few things that I found interesting: beauty and personal care apparel were strong. strong performers, but this customer trend around not necessarily the big ticket, maybe electronic item or big ticket item, but more value driven and essentials and pantry stocking that we saw during Prime Day too. So some super interesting trends there as we head into 2026 Prime.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to look at past to see, where we've all done really well, maybe made some errors that we could fix, and think about how we can become successful in this upcoming Prime Day. It's very clear that Prime Day continues to grow, right, in impact, but also complexity. So there are timing shifts, duration changes, right? Last year was the first 4-day Prime. We're not sure if we're going to see that again. Could. And the one thing that's certain is that competition is increasing. So for this year, we want to try to focus on what's actually going to move the needle. And to do that, let's start maybe with a quick poll from the audience. What do you believe your largest challenge is in preparing for Prime Day this year? So is it getting products seen early enough, right? That's visibility. Is it the inventory and planning side and forecasting demand? Is it the pricing side? How do you set the right price? Advertising, targeting, ultimately, or execution and operations. Please do fill this out. As soon as you fill this out, you'll see what others are saying as well. So don't skip this part. We want to understand from your perspective what the most important area is to dive into. And just early polls, I'm seeing setting the right price without hurting margins as taking the lead, but there's a couple others that are very close behind. And we're going to make sure that we try to dive into as many of these as possible. Operations and order volume spiking, not so much. What's going on? It seems like you all have that on lock. Very nice. Awesome. So I think we've got some good amount of answers in the door. So what I'm seeing is setting the right price without hurting margins being the absolute clear-cut winner. There's some in forecasting demand, avoiding stock issues, and then spending ad budget effectively. So we're gonna absolutely make sure we dive into those as we move along here. And we're gonna start with visibility. So I guess if you think about it, for a long time on Amazon, this search was massive. Keywords, advertisings, promotions, all still mission critical to the success on Prime Day and beyond. But the way shoppers are discovering products is absolutely evolving, right? Jason mentioned AI tools and Amazon introducing Rufus. And we know that external content is starting to play this massive role. So maybe Jason, we start here. How do you believe product discovery is changing on Amazon with tools like Rufus and AI?
This is I'm excited for this discussion because I'm excited to see what happens this year with Rufus and what the data looks like, because what we've seen so far is that 250 million shoppers have used it, and it's handling around 13% of our search right now. Rufus is our one of our favorite canine companions, a corgi that used to run the halls of the very first warehouse at Amazon. So we love naming our products and buildings even after nostalgia. So I think that's kind of fun. So Rufus is interesting in that we've all been taught search terms, keywords, product specific details. Rufus is now more optimizing towards a conversation with a shopper. So it's not going to give 50 listings and organically rank them that way. It's going to give you 5 recommendations that are going to drive towards a conversation or conversion. It's not like a full page of results. So like keyword stuffing, things that we've done in the past won't really work. So what's Rufus reading? Rufus is going to read your images and pull from reviews. Something to really keep an eye on. What's the consumer sentiment of your product as it decides which of those 5 to show? And that algorithm's, of course, constantly changing, but I think it's just optimizing for that conversation in addition to the ways that we've done things in the past. Rufus is going to continue to scale.
Yeah. Do you have any, tips of what the seller should do differently to try to optimize towards, Rufus in that regard?
Yeah, I would like give your product detail page a fresh eye look. Start from the basics. Like
Yeah.
some products require unit numbers or things like that in a title, but
Yeah.
shoppers probably aren't going to be asking Rufus about that. What are the conversations going on your reviews? And how can you improve those and drive more sentiment that way?
Yeah, it's like a conversation with the seller, right?
Yeah,
When
One
you're not,
if you think about what Rufus is, I mean, curious in your take on this, Jason, but it's fundamentally another search vehicle, but it's adding more variables.
Mhm.
And so I totally agree. I think the description details, the title details, like the granularity on how those themes are being searched for is just going to be more and more important.
yeah, yeah, I
Absolutely.
think,
I would optimize towards like bullet text in your images, in your second images in the product page. I don't know if Rufus can read a label versus the text on an image.
Right.
I just, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
No, it's totally interesting. I think one of the things that we've seen it from our side is that a lot of sellers still treat listings and product data as something that they update kind of one time and then leave alone. So, we're seeing discovery evolving super quickly with AI pulling from all these sources, like you just mentioned. So it's got to be the data needs to be structured consistently. It's got to be complete. It's got to be
Yep.
up to date as possible across all channels, right? Because these places are absolutely pulling from everywhere they can. So I guess looking at maybe another one for Jason, looking at areas of opportunity, what are the most common reasons products aren't getting found today?
Well, I think to back up your point there, it's optimizing for a search bar and not the conversation. So I think like what you could do differently, listings that actually answer questions within the detail. Of course, making sure like all the back end attributes are completely filled out. But I guess getting back to my last point, images should be pretty, but they should be informative. They should have clear takeaways on what is that lifestyle image trying to say? Because I don't know if Rufus is going to get what a lifestyle image is bringing to the table for a conversion or a conversation. Yeah,
Hmm.
more informative, more conversational. You could even have like question and answer format in the product detail page. I wonder if Rufus would
Yeah,
like that or appreciate it.
yeah. Tom, how about from your
Yeah, I
perspective? What
mean,
do you see?
you're going to get some signals from the 87% of search that's still, old school keywords too, right? So
Yep.
the more you can understand how those demand drivers are performing, the more you can kind of integrate that into how your product description and details are being built. Everything from ingredients to functional benefits
Yep.
and themes and all that.
Hmm.
That gives you a guidebook for what to test and learn with Rufus. The other interesting lens on that is it's not just search. You want the conversion, right? So there's certain elements of that. We'll show a little bit of that later that actually converts better. There's lots of things that pop up in search, but not every single one of those things is actually going to drive a sale.
Hmm. No, it's interesting. I'm super excited for you to go through those real life examples for the audience. We definitely see some optimization and mapping that can be done using a lot of those tools, right? There's automation tools that can be used to boost that visibility and ultimately conversions. Let's talk about maybe some timing. I think sellers still underestimate sometimes what it takes to win on leading up to Prime Day and ultimately on Prime Day. And even, Tom, I know you have some fun data that will show what happens after Prime Day, but maybe to Jason, how early should sellers start prepping for Prime Day? And I think we do have maybe a slide with this one. This is great.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Obviously a few of these dates are in the past now. So it's now like everything
That's right.
is compressed.
That's right.
If I were to stress urgency in one point of this conversation today, I think it'd be now. We have a very good idea that it's going to be late May and locked in. So what does that look like? Or late June, excuse me. If that's 8 weeks out, we start now. You're optimizing the listings and the back end attributes. Yeah, I think something that's interesting is that Rufus as a system needs time to index your content before the traffic starts hitting, and that time would be now, would be now within the next few weeks, to kick that off. So that's urgency: optimizing listings, optimizing attributes, and indexing content for Rufus. When you're like maybe 5 to 6 days out, that's where you're looking at deal submissions, shipping 2.5 to 3 times inventory. Ideally 2 to 3 weeks out, you're staging your PEDs, prime exclusive discounts. You're going to look at your PPC campaigns and throttling that budget 2 to 3 weeks out before Prime Day. I think the big point here, the key is that what we see, sellers who start 6 to 8 weeks early are consistently outperforming the last minute listing changes that probably won't propagate through our AI search in time. So I think the key takeaway here, Prime Day isn't won on just that day or the 2 days or 4 days. It's won the weeks before and also those weeks after, and how you take advantage and leverage that data.
Yeah, and I guess I'm learning a lot, right? Even from these conversations we're having, the Rufus ingestion of data totally makes sense. I'd love maybe Tom for you to build on what Jason was just saying. Maybe
Yeah,
what is
the heavy lifting is the operating stuff that Jason's talking about, inclusive of how you're optimizing your listings and integrating yourself into the search and now the Rufus algorithm. Important to bear in mind, like the results of that, you got to be patient for. And so if you want to pull up the couple of charts that I think we put together. So one thing that I think folks need to understand is people are used to the Prime Day cadence. Like right now, everybody's looking for when is the date, when is the date, when is the date. Now in the background, you got to be getting ready for this operationally with all the fulfillment and marketing and advertising things that you need to do. But consumers, and this is so search volumes obviously still the leading indicator of consumer interest and revenue conversion. You know, they're going to wait until the deals come, right? So this is just year over year search. So don't expect a lot of early signals there. You know, you'll get people who start browsing once the official announcement gets marketed in all press. But you'll see that huge spike. That's last year's right around Prime Day. And you'll see this year's trailing the same thing, right? So you're not going to see a lot of the intent that early. What's interesting, if you go to the next slide, is the impact on revenue. So there's a little bit of an eye chart. This is an example we pulled up last year. We thought we'd follow up on again. The dark lines are search and revenue for for Picasso tiles, which I have many boxes of in my house. And so you'll see, you know, what's interesting here is the search for Picasso tiles sort of levels, and then boom, on Prime Day, there's a deal. They've obviously invested in the promotional activity. They're looking for it. And then it spikes down, but the conversion from search to revenue tightens after Prime Day, right? So before Prime Day, people are waiting for the deal. After Prime Day, once they understand what the deal is, and a lot of folks have converted at that point, you're still likely to see a higher, you know, search to conversion uptick as a result of the investment that you've made before that, because people now know they're past the window. The other thing that I thought was interesting about that, those faded dots through April are this year's numbers, and this is one brand, so there's lots of things going on. It's tough to draw a lot of conclusions, but you'll see the revenue and search a little bit flip there. And I do wonder if that has a little bit to do with the Rufus impact, because we're still waiting for Jason to share that Rufus data with us. But what you might be seeing there is some of the search going through Rufus, not captured here, but still converting some of the revenue for this brand. And it'll still be interesting to see how that manifests itself through Prime Day and beyond.
Yeah, and I know we showed the heat map of marketplaces in general earlier, that Channel Engine helps customers become successful. And we also see upticks on a lot of marketplaces just based off of all of this volume, all this traffic that's happening on Amazon. So I think, you know, having your data across these channels is mission critical. Your listings, content need to be aligned as well.
Mhm.
Doesn't exist necessarily in isolation anymore. And I think when shoppers begin researching, comparing, and narrowing down their options, you have to have that data present at all stages to see these and to benefit from these spikes wherever they are. Maybe we'll kick over to inventory and fulfillment. So I guess once this visibility starts working, you've got the next challenge, right? So making sure that you can actually handle the demand. So that's where we've also seen things go wrong. Prime Day timing has changed. Demand doesn't always behave the way that we would hope it would. And what you plan for isn't always what happens, but that's not always a bad thing. Jason, maybe what should sellers factor into their inventory planning, given unpredictable Prime Day can be?
It's a great question. I think that's part of what I was saying earlier of like, all this starts now. It's time to start planning for what could happen, what could go right, what could go wrong. So it's not planning for just one scenario. You're going to have a low, mid, high demand case.
Sure.
Like, look, last year we just decided to double the amount of days from 2 to 3. That's a
Why not?
huge, yeah, right. That's a huge wrench, but that's a good problem too. So just expect the unexpected. I think oftentimes sellers can underestimate that early lead up in demand that might not even show up in search results, as Tom has some really interesting data that even we don't get to see sometimes too. So expect some potential FBA inbound delays that might add a week and a half. So ship early, start shipping now. I think if you just waiting for deadlines, there's going to be backlogs, and that could get us into a lot of trouble. So just build in flexibility. It's not always about shipping in or ordering the most, but like just planning for that uncertainty. What could go viral? What could we're all always really good at showcasing new sellers and exciting new brands, like a Picasso tile on like a big merchandising placement, but we're not good at telling agency partners or sellers that we're doing that. And then you get a 3x spike in what happened. So just plan for that. Plan for that uncertainty.
Tom, how about you? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, this will lead into a little bit of the benchmarking conversation we're going to have. But it's tough because Prime Day is inherently a very spiky phenomenon, and so there's always uncertainty there. But what you can understand is the historical data on a few areas that are worth benchmarking for demand planning purposes. And so, like, one of those is year-over-year category growth, right? Like, so what the category did last year. You're going to know if it's up 10, 15, or down this year. And that's going to be a factor into how you can expect year-over-year demand during Prime Day and every other period as well. You're going to know a little bit about your pricing power and your pricing elasticity relative to your competitors. And so you can start to model, hey, if I do this, here are some different promotional levers I can pull, and that may gain me a little bit of competitive advantage, and maybe I'll be up versus what I was last year. So I would take your performance last year and tweak it for those kinds of variables, and that'll give you a little bit tighter cone of uncertainty around that question.
Yeah, and I guess from a public data perspective, how easy is it to find information on category specific growth year over year? Kind of maybe a layup for you guys, but maybe not everyone on the conversation.
Yeah, I don't think there's nobody that has the same category level data that we do. That's one of the strengths of the data that I talked about earlier is, we always, whether you're doing pricing or launching a new product or really anything, the first thing you got to do is understand the category. So, hugely important data set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, we definitely see sometimes sellers planning for single scenarios versus maybe category or all of the areas that Jason maybe called out. We know it.
I see a lot of like beauty, a lot of health and personal care, CPG brands and participants on this call today. those are categories that have been growing, in the last few Prime days. So
Sure.
definitely expect that in your categories.
And the other thing I'll add to that is if you don't have like a lot of these categories, beauty, toys, and games, they're like 70, 80% free P. And so if you don't have that piece of it, you're really flying blind with the ROI you expect on some of this stuff.
Yeah, maybe actually in the chat, it could be helpful for us to know what categories you all play in, if you want to start tossing some out, just so we can speak to them. But
it's all the above, but I'll do my best to type from memory.
Yeah, these guys know every little thing about every single category. I'm just going to say that right
There's
now.
a couple like books we don't do, but most of the stuff that.
No, I love it. Maybe Jason, for you, we see some beauty device, men's shoes. I mean, some of these have been called out specifically, maybe not pets just yet. But Jason, when we think about fulfillment setup, FBA hybrid models, are there fallback options? What do you suggest these folks think about headed into Prime Day?
That good call. I guess to set the stage, I primarily work in our 3P business, so I don't really touch the vendor side. So I've always had my FBA hat on, like FBA is that gold standard. But for Prime Day, it's just different. Prime Day is not the whole. FBA is not going to be your whole plan. So I think it's a chance to go hybrid for fast fulfillment with FBA, and then like a 3PL. Or an 8, we also have multi-channel fulfillment. Same Amazon inventory can ship Shopify, Walmart, TikTok to Amazon, but just have a fallback ready, whether that's you fulfilling yourself for merchant fulfilled, or just making sure that's all aligned, and ensuring that like the inventory is all tagged correctly, the right nodes, and doesn't have any potential risk of not hitting the FC. So it might not be the cheapest plan, but for Prime Day, it's super important, and it's worth adding because something could break.
I think it's a really important call out, right? Like if you get this boost in visibility and excitement, the worst thing would be for you to not be able to fulfill orders. We think about stock out prevention. We've got some statistics around it could cost up to 15% of potential revenue. I would assume on Prime Day it could be larger. So, it's really important that you sync stock levels across all those sales channels, including other marketplaces, web shop, and during Prime Day that also means FBA inventory, syncing with your ERP, right, 3PLs, and using things like soft reservations to avoid things like overselling or underselling. So I think that's something that we look at really closely. Maybe Tom, from a data perspective, what does seller behavior look like kind of leading into Prime Day, and how can someone maybe use historical data better? You talked a little bit about it, but maybe thinking about 30, 60-day planning.
Yeah, that's sort of a good segue into the other bundle of slides I think we provided.
Yeah, let's pop that up.
Pull that up. And so it's complicated, right? Like you don't want to just think about Prime Day as a pricing and promotion vector. It's actually a chance to reevaluate your entire assortment and the competitiveness of that, and then get a little bit more informed about the different levers you may or may not want to pull. We're still waiting for those slides to come up.
Yeah, let's see. Grace, can you pop up this second set of slides? Yeah, thank you.
There we go. So this is, I'll breeze through some of this, but this is kind of the framework we build our UX and have conversations with our customers around. So the top here is how you benchmark, right? Like you got to understand the category. Is that a function of unit price growth? Where do you sit within that? And then fundamentally, any brand manager would tell you there's sort of 3 levers you can pull before you get to promotional activity. And that's, distribution. How am I using the 1P, 3P channel? Who am I competing with? Are there unauthorized sellers? That sort of thing. Assortment innovation gets really interesting because that's where you can use some of this PDP data now and start to index to themes of growth within a category. So like, do I have a competitive product that actually converts? And then Prime Day is obviously largely about pricing and promotions. That's another lever you can pull, but you really want to understand where you sit within all of these before you put all your money in the pricing back to the questions earlier, right? Like, am I going to hurt my margin? Am I spending my ad budget effectively? I'll walk you through a few things that'll hopefully make that a little bit better decision for you. If you go to the next slide, so we'll talk about pricing. We'll probably flip to the next one. So this is kind of analysis that we start with in our Cobalt platform, beautified for a slide here. But we'll look at toy building sets, which is where Magna-Tiles and Picasso tiles and all those fun games sit. Fun for all ages, by the way. I like to build them. So this category is pretty healthy. This subcategory within toys and games, it's growing 11%, dominated by Lego, which is part of toy building sets. They are 70% of the category. And so if you look at Lego, they're trailing the category. There's no surprise there. If you start to benchmark, Mold King, which in that table at the bottom there is growing, they're going to be under indexing pretty heavily versus the category. So not all growth is necessarily good growth if you're trailing the category. The other thing to keep in mind here is this is a $1.1 billion category. As I mentioned earlier, about 70% of that's 3P. And so there's $700 million of share capture that if you're not getting an accurate view in a 3P market is missing ROI for a lot of these dollars that you're spending. What I'll draw your attention to on the right, so ultimately like ad dollars spent should manifest themselves in market share gain. Because if you're not gaining share, it's hard to attribute incrementality to your advertising spend. And so the first thing before you spend a lot or discount is, do I actually have pricing power, and is that volume going to offset the reduction I decide to take? So if you look at somebody like Magna-Tiles, and they're struggling year over year, they're lost about a share point, and their revenue is actually down in a growing category. They've adopted a price reduction strategy, so their ASP went down 6%, as you can see on the x-axis there, but didn't really grow any revenue as a result of that. Right, so there's something else going on there besides it's too expensive, and so that's where all these other vectors need to be looked at before you throw more or you discount further, and you may not be getting the return, and your margins may take a big hit. Now, if you're Lego or some of these smaller brands with higher pricing power, like Hogo Kids, I haven't heard of that one, but that's one that actually took price increase and grew. Lego, as it defines the category, they're going to promote for Prime Day. You see that they've taken price reductions year over year as well, but they've got the brand equity to offset that with volume. So you need to really understand where you sit competitively there. It also starts to set the right targeting around ROAS. A lot of folks will just look at ROAS and not realize that if you have pricing power, your ROAS is actually going to be a little bit lower. Because your conversion will be less, but your margins will be higher, and vice versa, right? Like you may compete better as a Lincoln Logs, for example, where hey, I'm going to just undercut Lego and rely on the volume. That's where your ROAS will be a lot higher. That's where you get bigger benefits for promotion and Prime Day discounts. So that's kind of the first area we look at, and then if you go to the next, I think I just have one more in here. And that so once you understand pricing, the next question we try to be provocative about is, well, what's your share of voice versus your market share? And there's lots of nuance in that, but generally speaking, if your market share is greater than your share of voice, you have an opportunity to invest more and capture more share, generally speaking. Vice versa, right? Like, so if your market share is less than your share of voice, you may be defending a declining brand. We see this with lots of, flavor of the month type things, like Labubu, for example. Like, they're sort of past their prime there, and they're pumping a lot of dollars to maintain share of voice, but their share is declining. Now, there's also situations there where you're launching a new product and you want to get out there, and so market share has to catch up. You have to be strategic about that. But if you look at Lego in this example, it's likely that because they define the category, they'll invest heavily in Prime Day because they'll get a big bump out of some incremental spend there. Magna-Tiles, on the other hand, they're already spending well in advance of their market share. And so, they got to address some fundamental assortment, product competition issues, and perhaps even PDP and search issues before they can expect a good, return and favorable margin impact to heavy promotional activity. So I threw a bunch of like checklist stuff here on the right. If you'd like to get a demo with Jungle Scout, we can walk this through you for your brand. But these are the things. There's lots of things you need to think about before pricing just solves your problem. A lot of times that will be the answer, but you got to make sure that you've understood where you sit competitively ahead.
Yeah, Jason, how about you? I mean, I know we're jumping into pricing promotion, which is great. I mean, are these some of the benchmark questions that you're asking of your customers? I don't know if we can throw that slide back up for a second, but I have to imagine they're similar in a way.
Yeah. Yes. And personal note, I've seen a lot of the Jungle Scout data and had seen demos, very, very cool stuff and provide some really good actionable insights. I think from our side, like there are a lot of different promotions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think especially as we lead into Prime, ways to do this and think about it differently. Like you're going to need to start staging Prime exclusive discounts like 2 to 3 weeks before the event. So you're doing a lot of this stuff in parallel that can get a little bit messy. Yeah, I think benchmarks are including all those, including sponsored products, including sponsored brands. So customers see those badges around Prime Day. Like that's a key piece. I don't know if we want to jump into some different promotion options.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from your take, like which promotion options sellers should be focused on.
Well, I think the Prime exclusive discounts, PED is such a strange acronym that we love coming up with, but it's really like there's no fee there. There's a low barrier, but you need to stage that 2 to 3 weeks out. Okay. There are some things like that you need to do to qualify. So for example, like need at least 5% off your lowest price in the last 30 days, plan pricing now so that you're not like undercutting yourself when you add that discount in. There's also lightning deals. Those are those time limited. That's that high visibility countdown on the deals page. I would say submit those early. When we release those dates, those slots are going to fill up very fast. And the deadline closed sometime around like mid-late May last year, I believe. The best deals, that third one that's going to be longer running. It's more of a prominent placement. It does have a higher fee, but if we're going to have a 4-day Prime Day, it's going to have sustained exposure across that whole time period. But like conversationally here, they're not standalone. It's going to work best based off your category data, but also when it's aligned with search and display and what you're doing outside of Amazon too. So I would highly recommend the lowest hanging fruit here would be to run sponsored products and sponsored brands alongside the deals that you have, because shoppers are going to see both you and the badge for the Prime Day discount. And so that badge is probably going to be more likely the Rufus is going to see it. I feel like we can all probably agree that without knowing 100% how that algorithm's built, the badge is going to take a lot of prominence during that time period.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, I think we definitely see pricing can become pretty reactive during Prime Day, but the way you just described it was that you should be super proactive, right? Because you don't want to be reactive, and sellers that are performing best already have some of those rules in place before the event starts, right? So that they are cutting their margin. I think, Tom, what you said earlier is not all growth is good growth is so mission critical here. You got to think about something like margin through this whole process.
I think also it's interesting because we talked earlier about the high demand, good, bad problems that you're alluding to. Sometimes the pricing strategies go out the window. If a competitor is doing something that could a small update in price or deal combat. So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, you got to stay flexible. Like is definitely key here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta monitor it constantly. That's the tough part, is
Mhm.
there's a lot to look at, and so you need a structured way to be monitoring all those things. And to your point, Jason, around like competitors, you're 100% right. Like you may find a competitor that can take share away from you really quickly because they do have the pricing power to do that. And so understanding not just where you sit, but where they sit is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe this one for Jason. So obviously there's increasing costs from fees to logistics. What are maybe some of the things sellers should keep in mind to protect their margins during Prime Day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Costs are up, right? I sit in our agency program, and so I work with a lot of the service providers that are asking about the 3.5% fuel surcharge. There's higher per unit fees now. We've changed some of the ways we charge for inventory, and so most of the partners that I talk to are just rerunning a lot of their dynamics from an economic standpoint. So, I mean, don't discount into losing money, right? Like, don't do that. Model the promo against just our fee stack. So it might not just be one or two fees. There may be some other fees down the line as well, both from a retail and an ad fee perspective too. I just also, I don't think, and I'm curious what you guys think too. I just don't think every ASIN in your catalog belongs in the Prime Day event. I think you can just focus on promos with really healthy margins and strong conversion, and you'll get organic traffic from
Totally
the
agree.
rest.
Totally agree. Yeah, being able to look at all of that at an ASIN level, super important. You only want to promote the things that are strong, and not every ASIN is necessarily the strongest performer. So 100%.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So doubling down on what's worked for you in the past, right? But using all these fun new mechanisms like Rufus to help you excel seems like a good play. And I think pricing during Prime Day is a balancing act. So it's how do you stay competitive, making sure your margins are still making sense at the end of the day. I think it's also probably a pretty decent segue into advertising and targeting, right? So maybe let's build on some of these concepts. Obviously sellers are increasing ad spend during Prime Day, but it's how do you spend in the right places? So I know, Tom, you've mentioned a couple of times throughout the conversation, but maybe solidify what should sellers be looking at in terms of keyword and category benchmarks?
Yeah, so I'll show you this. I promise is the last slide of it, but I got.
I love these slides. Keep them coming.
And we'll send it out afterwards. So I'll start with sort of like a common mistake people make with keywords, and then I'll show you some of the sort of hot off the press things we're doing with keyword data that I think is pretty cool. So, we capture just about every single keyword you can capture on Amazon. One of the things folks will do is overreact to virality. I alluded to that earlier. In the toys category, it happens over and over again. Someone catches a wave, and then folks try to sort of capitalize on it or copycat it as a lower cost option, but they're too late. And so here's an example of like across different time periods how that happens over and over again. So like Squishmallow was the flavor of the month about a year ago. You'll see like search for that went through the roof in late 2024, early 2025. Since then, there was some seasonality around the Christmas timeframe, of course, but downward trend, right? It's declined. They got it. Like there's no sense in chasing that. Same thing happened with Labubu, big spike in last summer, and now, in fact, their share of voice is well ahead of their market share because they're throwing money to defend their position. You'll likely see that with Nido, which is now in the news. You'll see that huge spike right now. That's not necessarily the right content or keyword to focus on. So what we recommend is you take kind of a broader lens and look at more sustainable, what we call like themes of growth within a category. And so the next slide I'll show you is a very high level view of that. So, we track dozens of these different types of themes, whether they're ingredients or product positioning themes, or and some of these are more like holiday centric. But this is the stuff that gets captured through product titles, all the PDP content, product descriptors, and now with LLM capabilities, you kind of aggregate that up into real themes, and then you can start to index that to demand, which is the keyword stuff here, right? Like, what are the types of keywords that are signaling these are in demand, and then conversion, right? So this is kind of closing the search to conversion gap a little bit, because you can figure out which themes are actually over indexing, again, indexing to the category in terms of revenue growth, right? So we just picked 5 different themes here. So Lego and brick encompasses every sort of keyword that could roll up to that sort of search. And you'll see, volume here is fairly low, a declining year over year keyword. On the opposite end, you see, like, this is a function, I think, of the boo craze, right? This is across broader toys and games, and not just blocks. So like plush and stuffed, again, there's dozens of keywords within that, but folks are looking for that sort of thing. And the growth is even accelerating year over year. But what's interesting is that plush stuffed type of product. So all the ASINs that qualify for that sort of type of product, are really just trailing the toys and games category. So, that's not to say that's not something you should think about if that's the category you're playing in, but it's likely to be a pretty expensive keyword. And you may find that you can, ride the category wave without putting a ton of money into that. On the opposite end, I still buy magnet tiles, right? In fact, that's over indexing versus the category. So it's like 1.3x a category that's already growing 15-20%. And so there's low hanging fruit there with some of those types of keywords that could be more affordable and maybe drive a little bit better conversion. So this is the kind of thinking that we're starting to coach our clients through a little bit. Again, this is just 5. There's dozens of these within every category and subcategory you can dive into, but I thought that was just an interesting view on a better way to start to think about, like, the ROI of some of your advertising dollars.
I think it's helpful. Jason, you still there?
We lost Jason on that.
We lost Jason. You just mic dropped Jason. You're like, no, that's fine. I think this data is super relevant, obviously, trying to figure out how ads, promotions should be working together through Prime Day to try to drive that the right visibility. One of the things that Channel Engine does through this process is actually we've got an automated repricing tool to help win the buy box, right? So you're thinking about something like margin. I love, I highlighted not all growth is good growth, right? So how do you reprice based on competitors? You can do that within Channel Engine, fully automated. You can set minimum price. You can set a max price and kind of let the platform go and help you stay in front of your competitors in that regard. Welcome back, Jason.
All good. Sorry about that. A little technical difficulty.
No, you're good. I have a question for you. Well, we'll just throw you right back into the fire.
Great.
From Amazon's side, I know you chat a little bit about it, but how do ads and promotions work together specifically to drive results on Prime Day?
Well, yes, we always say that promotions are going to convert and ads are going to drive the traffic. So don't run them in isolation. Like, make sure that they're aligned to ad campaigns running this with ASINs running those deals. Just keep it simple. Don't overthink things for Prime. Sponsored products right on those deal ASINs. Sponsored brands for category searches. I think that's going to be really important to win in sponsored brands with a lot of new shoppers to the platform. Display for retargeting if you have that within your budget, and really I think that's the playbook. Of course, you could get a lot deeper, but they have to work together, driving to those ASINs that are running deals.
Yeah, let's flip it. What are common mistakes sellers make when it comes to ads and targeting during Prime Day. Maybe start with you, Tom.
Well, we talked a little bit about, just sort of chasing top line and over-indexing on search versus conversion. We always, it can be a bit overwhelming to try to manage, buy box capture and the day-to-day pricing and the number of sellers you're interacting with for the buy box, let alone all the keywords and optimizing for a lot of the information I talked about. So we always recommend using an agency like yourselves to help with that, because ROI here does come a little bit at the margins with how well, because to your point, everybody's going to be playing in this game. And so if you can be just a little bit smarter with your pricing, you can just be a little bit smarter with the keywords that you're investing in, you're going to have an edge there, and that's going to make a pretty significant bottom line impact.
Yeah.
Jason.
Add on that, like trying to do this yourself. This is challenging. Relies more often than not on a partner. But don't front load the budget and burn it all out on day one. I'm assuming we'll be probably 4 days again this year, so you're gonna have to spread that out evenly, both before and after. I guess I said this earlier, just don't overcomplicate things. I think there's going to be external traffic that's going to come to your Amazon page, both from social or influencer traffic, and just not ignoring that too, especially from a retargeting standpoint. So it's not underspending always. It's just overcomplicating can be the problem. Just let the promotions that we built in our algorithm that's going to drive towards conversion do a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, you said it best, right? Ads shouldn't work in isolation. They're going to support what you've already got working. Few minutes left, so I think we can sneak in execution and operations before we wrap. But we talked about visibility, planning, pricing, ads, promotions. Let's talk about execution. This is where things can either come together and work super well or all fall apart. Maybe Jason, what does execution really look like when thinking about scale during Prime and common operational mistakes sellers can make when volume starts to pump up?
There's going to be category and even subcategory considerations when we think about this, but what's going to work with 50, 25 orders a day might not work when you're getting 500 or 1,000 orders a day. Well, we want it to, but like if your in-stock levels, your promo management, if you're requiring somebody just clicking a button, Prime Day and it's going to expose that essentially. So set those rules before the event. Demand spikes can happen very, very quickly. What that looks like is 10x volume in an hour. If you don't have like alerts or fallback ready, you can blow through all that. That's preparing for the good problems. But you're not going to be able to predict everything. So the sellers that win are going to react fast because you've built the flexibility already into your setup.
What's a good problem? What does that mean?
That's that unexpected success. You land on the homepage. A bunch of celebrities just feature you externally. It could be 50, 500x demand overnight with no notice. We're not going to warn you. We're not going to send you an email and be like, hey, you're going to get featured, which I mentioned earlier. This just happens. So don't make sure you take advantage of the moment. Just be ready. Plan for what could go. Plan for what could go right.
Yeah, that's right. Like these volume spikes, manual processes really can't keep up. So that's where automation becomes mission critical, keeping inventory, pricing, listings all aligned. It does look like we've had a question in the chat. I don't know if Tom, you can see that.
I would just type in a response, but I'll verbalize it for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting category because Lego's 70% of it, and so they have a ton of organic brand equity. So they're being really smart about their ad dollars because I'm sure they realize that. Now, in a category like that, if you're a competitor, you're going to have to pay to compete. And so you just want to be really thoughtful about what your strategy is there to knock out an incumbent like that.
Oh, the questions are starting to fire. Hold on, let's finish. We'll finish, and then we'll do a couple minutes of Q&A. I do have another one for you, Tom. So, from a data planning perspective, what should sellers double down on before they get into that execution phase?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's getting your hands around the right benchmark, the goalposts you want to set, right? And to Jason's point, you may get very pleasantly surprised that the spiking nature of Prime Day is never going to be totally predictable. But you want to understand, is this a category that we can grow with? What I really recommend is set some market share goals, right? Like, is this something we can take a point or two out of?
Yeah.
You'll see that historically too during Prime Day. People who do that well can take 5-10% share for an extended period of time, and then do the math on what that equals. You can start to back into an ROI pretty easily out of that.
Yeah. I think it's a really good notion, and that Prime Day doesn't reward necessarily the perfect plan, but you have to be ready. You have to be ready to
Right.
take control when things do move super fast, because they will absolutely move quickly. Yeah, maybe let's close with a final question, and then we can, if we have a moment or two, we can try to answer any of these questions that come in. But I guess if there's just one thing a seller should walk away from this conversation with for Prime 2026, what is it? Jason, I'll start with you.
If you haven't started to plan yet, start today.
Yeah. Tom, how about you?
Know your category, understand who you're taking share from, and set a goal.
Yeah. My takeaway is there are experts all around us. Don't ignore them, right? Let's leverage them. Let's use them for what we're all really, really good at, which is hopefully having the best Prime Day imaginable 2026. So let's wrap there. We do have maybe a couple more minutes to answer some questions, but before we start into those, you can set up a consultation with Channel Engine today. Tom had mentioned doing the same thing with Jungle Scout. Highly recommend doing something like that. And Jason and team are also super available for discussions leading up to Prime Day as well. Maybe we have a couple minutes left, so why don't we try to answer Vlad's question, and I think maybe even Madison had a question. I think those are probably your way, Tom, if you can see them.
Yes, just a second. I was making sure that folks have the right access to contact us as well. So I'll put something in the chat.
We'll follow up.
Yeah, perfect. So is there or do you recommend new product launch during Prime Day period? Jason, I'd be curious on your perspective on that. Yes, presuming you've done the similar diligence on, what share you want to take out of what subcategory and what's your strategy for that. So it's a great way to make a splash, right? If you've got a product that you're confident in and you feel like you've done the price and diligence ahead of time. I will say it's a little bit harder to understand that, right? So, if there's some question marks there, it's
over to you, Jason.
I'll jump in. I was just about to, because I think just setting expectations that it might not capture that Prime Day demand, but it's just complex. Like, if you're doing this expertly, you've got your social channels, your influencers, like, all aligned on this launch, and then it's making a big splash. As long as you can do that operationally, but I just wouldn't expect like a huge Prime Day thing. One thing we mentioned earlier, which I think is an interesting takeaway, is Rufus needs some time to get relevance. So it probably wouldn't capture it at that point.
Love it. Well, let's wrap there. I think that it's clear amazing things happen when you all are thinking about leveraging Channel Engine, Amazon, and Jungle Scout in these conversations. Thanks everyone for joining, and good luck in your upcoming Prime Day 2026. Thanks everyone.
Thank you guys.